The official charge, when translated from the Grolvaxian legal dialect, a language that sounded like a cement mixer gargling ball bearings, was willful and egregious violation of Aesthetic Mandate 7, Gamma 9, unauthorized chromatic and textural adulteration of a standardized sustenance dispenser. In human terms, Kevin Chen had made the nutrient paste machine do a swirl. A chocolate and vanilla-flavored swirl, to be precise. This, apparently, was a crime so heinous, so fundamentally offensive to the Grolvaxian sense of uniform order, that it warranted exile. Not just any exile. They were being sent to Penal Colony 734, a planet so irredeemably awful that the Grolvaxians didn't even bother giving it a proper name. It was just a number on a spreadsheet of galactic misery. The Grolvax were big on spreadsheets. And uniform, non-swirled nutrient paste. High Adjudicator Kthar, a being who resembled a 7-foot-tall obsidian filing cabinet with too many arms, droned on from his floating dais. His voice, filtered through a translator, was a monotone of pure, distilled boredom. And thus, this tribunal, in its infinite and dispassionate wisdom, sentences the designated biological contaminants, humanity, Group 27b, to a standard cycle of corrective isolation on Penal Colony 734. Here, you will reflect upon the virtues of conformity and the profound ugliness of your chaotic impulses. Down on the defendant's platform, Major Eva Rostova, late of the Terran Alliance Marine Corps, muttered under her breath. Chaotic impulses. He tried to make lunch less depressing. I heard the swirl was quite jaunty, whispered Dr. Eris Thorne, a xenobotanist who was now, regrettably, an expert in alien jurisprudence. Aesthetically, I felt it had merit. Kevin Chen, the perpetrator of the great swirl crime, just shrugged. He had the placid, unshakable demeanor of a man who had spent 10 years in middle management. He'd seen department heads wage war over the color of a graph in a PowerPoint presentation. A multi-armed alien judge getting his mandibles in a twist over dessert presentation felt familiar. They just lack vision, he said, not unkindly. It's a branding issue. Rostova stared at him. A branding issue. We're being exiled to a literal hellworld because you played with the soft-serve machine, and you think it's a branding issue. Everything's a branding issue, Major, Kevin said serenely, as the floor beneath them began to glow with the ominous light of a teleportation beam. They're positioning it as a punishment. We just need to reposition it as an opportunity. And then the world dissolved into a screech of light and sound, and they were falling. The landing was less a landing and more of a sudden, gravity asserting arrival in a bog that smelled of sulfur and regret. The four of them, Kevin, Major Rostova, Dr. Thorne, and a perpetually bewildered-looking French chef named Pierre who'd been arrested for trying to garnish his paste with a sprig of parsley he'd grown in a contraband hydroponics kit, found themselves ankle-deep in viscous, purple mud. The sky was a bruised plum color, streaked with sickly green clouds. Jagged spires of rock, sharp as broken glass, clawed at the horizon. The air was thick enough to chew and tasted vaguely of burnt electronics. A nearby plant, which looked like a Venus flytrap designed by a goth teenager, snapped its jaws at a passing six-legged lizard, dissolving it into a puff of acrid smoke. Pierre, his white chef's hat somehow still perched jauntily on his head, made a sound of profound Gallic despair. This is not a place for gastronomy. The terroir, it is compromised. Dr. Thorne was already waving a scanner around, his face growing paler with every beep. Okay. Good news and bad news. Good news, the atmosphere is technically breathable. Bad news, it contains trace elements of neurotoxic compounds that will, over a period of weeks, lead to mild paranoia, vivid hallucinations, and a tendency to argue with inanimate objects. So, Tuesday, Rostova grunted, pulling her standard-issue combat boots out of the muck with a wet schlorp. She scanned the area, her military training kicking into high gear. All right. First things first. Shelter. We need to get out of the open. Thorne, any of this nightmare foliage not actively trying to kill us? Pierre, take inventory of the survival packs. Chen, for the love of God, don't touch anything. Kevin, however, was not listening. He was staring at the horizon, where one of the jagged rock spires was catching the light from the system's dim, angry-looking sun. It glittered. Not with ice, but with something crystalline and sharp. He tilted his head. You know, he said thoughtfully, from this angle, that looks less like a death shard of geological agony, and more like an art installation. Rostova's eye began to twitch. This was a new development. It's a rock, Chen. A sharp rock. But it's about the narrative, Major, Kevin replied, pulling a small, waterproof datapad from his pack. He began typing. Consider the target demographic. We're not aiming for the family on a budget crowd. We're aiming for the thrill seeker. The adventurer. The 1%er who has already climbed Everest and now wants to tell their friends they've free-climbed the obsidian daggers of Xylos. Xylos? Thorne asked, distracted from a reading that suggested the local water had a pH roughly equivalent to battery acid. Penal Colony 734 is a terrible name, Kevin said dismissively. No punch. No sizzle. We're rebranding. Xylos is good. Or maybe. Cinderfall. Yeah, Cinderfall. It's dramatic. Evocative. It hints at danger but in a sexy, volcanic chic kind of way. He looked around at the bubbling mud pits and the acid-spewing flora. This place doesn't have a livability problem. It has an image problem. Major Rostova put her face in her hands. The neurotoxins, it seemed, were working faster on some than on others. The first few days were a masterclass in why humanity probably deserved to be exiled. Rostova, a being of pure, focused competence, managed to secure a cave that wasn't already occupied by something with too many teeth. She established a perimeter, set watches, and began rationing their nutrient-paste bars, the nonce-world, regulation kind that tasted like sadness and cardboard. Dr. Thorne, meanwhile, became a walking encyclopedia of impending doom. Don't drink that water, he'd say. It's a hyperacidic solution that will dissolve your esophagus. Don't touch that glowing moss, its bioluminescence is a byproduct of a flesh-eating fungus. Don't breathe too deeply when the wind shifts to the east, that's the spore cloud from the sudden agony cactus. Pierre, for his part, had entered a state of culinary nihilism. He would stare at the nutrient bars with an expression of such profound offense that Rostova worried he might simply will himself out of existence. It has no soul, he'd whisper, poking one with a stick. No passion. You cannot sauté this. You cannot flambe it. It is an anti-food. And Kevin was taking notes. He followed Thorne around, not with fear, but with the boundless enthusiasm of a marketing executive on a product fact-finding mission. Flesh-eating fungus, you say? Kevin would ask, tapping on his datapad. But is it a fast-acting fungus? We could market it as a revolutionary, all-natural hair removal treatment. The Cinderfall smooth, embrace the burn. Thorne would just stare at him, his mouth agape. It would remove your skin, Kevin. And your muscles. And your bones. Okay, so we lead with the side effects in the fine print. We need to manage expectations. How about the sudden agony cactus? It spores, upon inhalation, cause every nerve ending in your body to fire simultaneously, simulating the sensation of being burned alive from the inside out, Thorne said, his voice trembling. Kevin's eyes lit up. A transcendent experience of pure sensation. For the tourist who has felt everything, we offer the chance to feel more. We'll call it the synaptic overload, spiritual retreat. We'll need to build a yurt. And charge a fortune. It was on day 5, during the first geyser event, that Kevin's madness began to look suspiciously like a plan. Without warning, the ground began to shake. 100 yards from their cave, a fissure opened up and a pillar of roaring, blue-green flame shot 1,000 feet into the plum-colored sky. It was a geyser, but instead of water, it was venting superheated, combustible methane. Rostova and Thorne hit the deck, instinct screaming at them to take cover. Pierre yelped and dropped a nutrient bar, which he didn't seem too upset about. Kevin, however, stood there, hands on his hips, with a look of pure, unadulterated professional admiration. Now that, he declared over the roar, is production value. He turned to the others, his face illuminated by the flickering, otherworldly flame. Okay, team. Huddle up. I've finished the preliminary marketing plan. Rostova slowly got to her feet, wiping purple mud off her cheek. Chen, we are in a survival situation. My plan involves not dying. What, precisely, is your plan? Kevin held up his datapad. On the screen was a sleek, professionally designed logo, a stylized flame over a jagged mountain peak, with the words, Cinderfall, the ultimate extreme tourism destination, underneath. My plan, he said, is to create a tourism brochure so appealing, so ridiculously high-end, that the Grolvax will have a legal and economic meltdown. We're not prisoners, people. We're pioneers. We're the pre-opening management team of the galaxy's most exclusive, most dangerous, and most expensive resort. And we are going to send them an invoice. There was a long, deep silence, broken only by the roar of the methane geyser and the distant, mournful cry of something that was probably being eaten. Pierre was the first to break. A resort, you say? Does this resort have a kitchen? Kevin smiled. It will have a 5-star restaurant, my friend. Specializing in, locally sourced, flame-grilled cuisine, he gestured with his head towards the geyser. A flicker of something dangerous and creative sparked in the chef's eyes. Flame-grilled, you say? Rostova looked from Kevin's beatific face to Pierre's sudden culinary inspiration to Thorn, who was quietly rocking back and forth, muttering about atmospheric combustion thresholds. She let out a long, weary sigh. It was the sigh of a woman who had fought hive-minded insectoids on the moons of Cygnus X-1 and found this, right here, to be the most insane situation of her entire career. Fine, she said, her voice flat. Fine, Chen. You want to make a brochure? Let's make a brochure. But if a rock lizard eats you while you're trying to get a good action shot, I'm listing it as death by misadventure. Kevin beamed. Excellent. I'll need you for the Apex Predator Safari photo shoot, Major. Try to look rugged but approachable. The project, which Kevin cheerfully dubbed Operation Upsell, began in earnest. It was, without a doubt, the most absurd and life-threatening marketing campaign ever conceived. Their first task was to photograph the local wildlife. Dr. Thorne had identified the apex predator of the region, a creature he'd named Crystal Lotus vexatus, or, as Rostova more bluntly called it, a razor glimmer. It looked like a panther sculpted from obsidian glass, moved with impossible speed, and had a habit of disemboweling its prey with claws that could slice through their standard-issue composite armor. Okay, Kevin said, peering from behind a rock. The razor glimmer was currently lapping at a pool of what Thorne had identified as mostly harmless mercury. We need a shot that says majestic, not "will wear your spleen as a hat." Eris, can you get it to look this way? Maybe call its name. Thorne gave him a look of pure horror. You want me to provoke the 600-pound crystalline death cat? Not provoke. Engage. For branding purposes, Kevin corrected. Eva, can you get into the frame? Off to the side. I want a sense of scale. Pose with your rifle. Look confident. Like you're leading a high-end safari and the clients are just out of shot, sipping champagne. Rostova, lying flat on her stomach 50 yards away, spoke into her comms, her voice a low growl. Chen, I have a firing solution. I can take it down from here. That would be a very good action shot. No, no, no. Kevin hissed. We're not selling death, we're selling the experience of proximity to death. It's a crucial distinction. We need it alive. And preferably looking noble. It was Pierre who accidentally solved the problem. While trying to find anything remotely edible, he'd stumbled upon a patch of bulbous, pulsating fungi. Thorne had warned him they were mildly explosive if mishandled. Pierre, in a fit of culinary frustration, had thrown one at a rock. The resulting pop and flash of purple light was startling but harmless. Now, seeing the predicament, Pierre had an idea. He crept up behind Kevin's position. Monsieur Chen, he whispered. Regardez, he took one of the pop fungi and, with the practiced flick of a wrist honed by years of saucing plates, lobbed it into the air so it landed about 20 feet to the left of the razor glimmer. The fungus burst with a soft FUMP and a flash of violet light. The razor glimmer, startled, whipped its head around, its multifaceted crystalline eyes catching the dim sunlight. It struck a pose of magnificent, startled alertness, its glassy fur shimmering. That's it. Kevin screamed, snapping photos with his datapad. Hold that. Hold that. Oh, that's the cover shot right there. Majestic. Fierce. A little bit vulnerable. It's perfect. The razor glimmer, having decided the pop fungus was not a threat, lost interest and went back to drinking mercury. Kevin was already scribbling copy. The Cinderfall Apex Safari, Witness the elusive razor glimmer in its natural habitat. Our expert guides ensure an experience so close, you can feel the thrill. Note, proximity may vary. The Cinderfall Resort is not liable for spontaneous disembowelment. All participants must sign a comprehensive waiver. Next on the agenda was the Spa and Wellness section. This revolved around what the Grolvaxian Planetary Survey had dryly labeled region of corrosive atmospheric precipitation. It was a valley where a unique combination of geothermal vents and mineral deposits created a near-constant, drizzling rain with the pH of industrial drain cleaner. "I'm not going in there," Thorne stated flatly. He held up a strip of their tent fabric, which he'd left exposed to the rain for 30 seconds. It was now a piece of lace. "It will dissolve our environmental suits in under 10 minutes and our bodies in under 20. Kevin tapped his chin, unfazed. "So, an express treatment. We can work with that. We'll call it the melt-away stress peel. It's all about the language, Eris. We're not dissolving. We're exfoliating." Vigorously. He turned to Rostova. "Major, I need you to stand at the edge of the valley. Look serene. Like you've just had a refreshing, life-altering spa day." Rostova's good eye twitched. "I will look like I'm staring into a valley of acid rain, which is exactly what I will be doing." "Just think relaxing thoughts," Kevin coached. "Imagine you're on a beach. A nice beach. With non-acidic water." Rostova stared into the misting valley of horrors, her hand resting on the butt of her sidearm. Kevin snapped a picture. The angle was perfect. With the mist swirling around her, it was impossible to see the ground actively dissolving a few feet in front of her. She looked stoic, pensive, and vaguely cleansed. "Perfect," Kevin chirped. "Rejuvenate your body and soul in the cleansing mists of the Azure Valley. Our signature chemical peel strips away not just dead skin, but your worldly cares, revealing the new you beneath. Note, may also reveal bone. Treatments are timed for optimal safety. Do not extend your stay. Seriously." The culinary section was Pierre's domain. Inspired by the methane geyser, he became a man possessed. He started experimenting. He discovered that a certain type of rock-burrowing grub, when flash-seared by the geyser's flame, tasted surprisingly like bacon. He found a scaly, tuber-like root that, when slow-roasted in the hot sulfur mud, became soft and sweet. His masterpiece, however, involved the gloomfang, a creature that looked like a badger crossed with a piranha. It was vicious, fast, and utterly inedible when cooked by conventional means. But Pierre, using a long metal pole salvaged from their drop pod wreckage, managed to spear one and hold it over a methane vent just as it erupted. The result was a culinary miracle. The intense, instantaneous heat seared the outside to a perfect crust while leaving the inside impossibly tender. The methane imparted a smoky, complex flavor. Pierre presented the dish to the group on a flat piece of slate. He'd even found a small, bright red lichen to use as a garnish. "Voila," he announced, his voice thick with emotion. "Le steak de gloomfang à la flamme du geyser." Kevin took a bite. His eyes went wide. "Pierre, this is incredible." Rostova, chewing cautiously, nodded in agreement. "It's actually good. Tastes a bit like venison. If venison was trying to kill you 5 minutes ago." Thorne, after running a quick toxicity scan that came back, improbably safe, tried a piece and had to sit down. The Maillard reaction at this temperature and pressure, it's chemically impossible. It should be charcoal. Or poison. Instead, it's delicious. Kevin was already snapping photos and writing copy. The Emberfall Grill, dining on the edge. Our 5-star, Geyserside restaurant offers a menu unlike any other in the galaxy. Savor our signature dish, the geyser-seared gloomfang, cooked to perfection in the planet's own natural furnace. An unforgettable culinary event. Will need to design a wine list. Eris, any of the local liquids fermented instead of corrosive. There's a swamp fungus that produces a highly alcoholic fluid as a defense mechanism, Thorne offered weakly. Drinking it causes temporary blindness and a profound sense of existential dread. Kevin's fingers flew across his datapad. "Excellent. We'll call it Nocturne Noir and describe it as a challenging vintage for the contemplative palate." For the next 2 weeks, the 4 castaways worked. Rostova's tactical skills were repurposed for location scouting and ensuring the photography team wasn't eaten. Thorne's scientific knowledge was twisted into writing plausible-sounding technobabble for the brochures, geological wonders, and unique biophysics sections. Pierre established a functional, if deeply hazardous, outdoor kitchen. And Kevin orchestrated it all, a maestro of marketing bullshit, turning every lethal feature of Cinderfall into a luxury selling point. The razor-sharp rock fields became the Crystal Labyrinth, a challenging parkour experience. The constant, unsettling seismic tremors were billed as subdermal base therapy, a natural form of massage. The hallucinogenic air was part of the Vision Quest package. He designed pages for activities they couldn't possibly offer, but that sounded amazing. Zero-G lava surfing, coming soon. Deep core spelunking in molten tunnels, tame your own silicate worm mount. Finally, it was done. A 28-page, full-color, glossy digital brochure. It was beautiful. It was audacious. It was a masterpiece of weaponized marketing. The cover was the shot of the razor glimmer, looking majestic and deadly. The tagline, in a sleek, elegant font, read, Cinderfall. You've survived the rest. Now survive the best. The last page was a price list. A weekend Apex Safari package started at 500,000 galactic credits per person. A 10-minute session in the Azure Mist Spa was 75,000. A single plate of geyser-seared Gloomfang was 2,000. Now came the final problem. How to send it? Rostova pointed to the emergency beacon from their survival kit. That's our only option. It's designed to send a simple, repeating distress signal on a Grolvaxian military frequency. Kevin smiled. A distress signal. Or a high-bandwidth data burst disguised as a distress signal. He turned to Thorne. Eris. You're a genius with hardware and software. How hard would it be to hotwire this beacon, bypass the distress signal protocols, and make it transmit a 300 megabyte PDF file instead? Thorne looked at the beacon, then at the datapad, then at the assorted wreckage of their drop pod. A slow, manic grin spread across his face. The neurotoxins, the stress, and the sheer, unadulterated insanity of the last month had finally broken him in the best possible way. Hard, he said, his eyes gleaming with mad scientist energy. Kevin, it'll be a work of art. High Adjudicator Kthar was reviewing quarterly reports on standardized container manufacturing when the alert chimed. On his main view screen, a notification popped up. Incoming transmission, Penal Colony 734. Signal type, standard distress beacon. Kthar allowed himself a small, internal flutter of satisfaction. His multifaceted eyes remained impassive, but he felt it. The inevitable plea for mercy. The groveling. The human spirit, so chaotic and arrogant, finally broken by the bleak, uniform reality of Penal Colony 734. It was a testament to the system. The system always worked. On screen, Subdirector, he commanded, his voice a low rumble. His subordinate, a younger, more nervous Grolvax, manipulated the controls. Signal is unusual, high adjudicator. It's not the standard low bitrate SOS packet. It's a high-density data stream. Very large. Kthar's antennae twitched. A large data stream. Perhaps it was a confession. A detailed log of their suffering. He could use that for future educational materials. Decode and display it. The screen flickered. And then, in stunning high resolution, the image resolved. It was a sleek, obsidian creature, its crystalline fur shimmering, posed against a backdrop of jagged, alien mountains. Below it, in an offensively stylish font, were the words, Cinderfall. You've survived the rest. Now survive the best. Silence. A profound, galaxy-spanning, what in the name of uniform paste is this silence descended upon the adjudication chamber. Kthar stared. His brain, a marvel of bureaucratic logic and procedural thinking, tried to process the image. It failed. It was like trying to divide by zero. Subdirector, he said slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. What is this? It appears to be a marketing pamphlet, high adjudicator, the subdirector stammered, his limbs trembling slightly. The screen changed. A picture of the human female, the soldier, staring pensively into a swirling mist. The text read, "Rejuvenate your soul in the azure mists." The survey of 734 noted that region as having a corrosive atmosphere, a technician in the background whispered. Lethal exposure in 12 minutes. The screen changed again. A plate of expertly seared meat with a jaunty red garnish. The Emberfall grill, dining on the edge. Another technician, this one from the xenobiology department, squinted. Is that a gloomfang? Our data suggests their flesh is highly toxic and fibrous, like chewing on poisoned cables. Then came the price list. The silence in the room deepened, if that was even possible. 500,000 credits for a weekend. 75,000 for a 10-minute acid bath. It was obscene. It was brilliant. Kthar's mind was racing, legal codexes and economic statutes crashing against each other like tectonic plates. They had sent criminals to a penal colony. The criminals had not asked for rescue. They had not begged for forgiveness. They had rezoned the penal colony into a commercial enterprise. A luxury commercial enterprise. And that was the problem. The Galactic Codex, in its infinite and dispassionate wisdom, had very, very strict laws about planetary sovereignty and even stricter laws about commerce. Article 984, subsection B, paragraph 3 clearly stated, no member of the hegemony shall impede, obstruct, or otherwise interfere with a legitimate, non-coerced commercial enterprise operating within established legal frameworks. They had established a business. They had set prices. They had a brand. Legally, Penal Colony 734 was no longer a prison. It was a resort. An absurdly dangerous, ludicrously expensive resort, but a resort nonetheless. And the humans weren't prisoners anymore. They were management. To keep them there against their will would now be kidnapping. To shut down their operation would be interfering with commerce. They had found a loophole in the very fabric of Grolvaxian society. A loophole the size of a planet. Kthar felt a sensation he had not experienced in over 300 cycles. It was the cold, sharp sting of being comprehensively and utterly outmaneuvered. Outmaneuvered by a species that thought swirly nutrient paste was a good idea. His subdirector, looking utterly terrified, approached the dais. High Adjudicator. What are our orders? Kthar stared at the screen, which was now displaying a beautifully rendered map of the Crystal Labyrinth Parkour Challenge. He saw the whole chain of events in his mind. The arrest. The trial. The sentencing. The smug satisfaction. And now this. This brochure. A monument to chaotic, illogical, brilliant human audacity. He looked at the faces of his staff. They were confused. Shocked. But he also saw something else in the eyes of a few of the younger ones. A flicker of something that looked disturbingly like interest. One of them, a junior attaché from the Zlar species, a race of thrill-seeking adrenaline junkies who considered navigating asteroid fields without shields to be a fun Saturday, spoke up, his voice barely a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a laser. High Adjudicator, he began, his three eyes wide with a terrible, dawning wonder. The brochure, does it say how one makes a reservation? Kthar slowly lowered his head into two of his four hands. The system had not worked. The system had just been sold a timeshare. And the worst part? The absolute worst part was that the synaptic overload spiritual retreat sounded, to a secret, shameful part of his soul, profoundly intriguing. He was going to need a bigger filing cabinet for this headache. Somewhere, on a hell world 1,000 light-years away, he was sure he could hear the faint sound of a human marketer laughing.